Okay, welcome to this week's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about decks. We're going to go through how you can do or create your deck designs and obviously how you can quantify them. We're also going to introduce the Handrail or Balustrade tool and show you what you can actually do with that tool, which is obviously a fairly recent feature that we've added. And we're going to really kind of go into some, or try and demonstrate some of the different kinds of decks, or ball pads, such as, flat, raised, multi-level, etc. So we'll do our best to get through them. When we were prepping quickly just before this webinar, I was kind of toying around with the idea of showing you the deck alongside a project, but I'm thinking that it's better just to clarify and run through the deck tools separately rather than try and get a little bit distracted by additional geometry, etc. As always, the benefit of coming along to the live sessions is that you can ask your questions. So don't hesitate to ask the questions throughout the session. Typically, I wait or won't answer them until we get to the Q&A at the end. We typically do about a 20-minute Q&A, depending on how we are going for time. So again, don't hesitate to ask those questions, because the people that ask them at the beginning will obviously have more of a chance that I'll get to them when we go into the Q&A. Okay, so there's a few things I want to just discuss with the deck, or creating decks, and really they're coming from the joist tool itself. So I'm using a Mac, which is why you're probably seeing that if you're from a PC, there's a slight difference in the way the toolbars are set up, etc. But in here, the way that you're going to control decks is actually through the flooring tool. So you're going to go into the flooring tool, and then obviously this gives you the ability to create your slabs, which you can create from there. You can do your pads, for example. You can also do a standalone footing tool. You've obviously got your joist tool, and then you've got a floor tool. And I am going to talk about the floor tool because it's actually a really interesting one in which you can do other elements that you wouldn't think about, such as paving or kind of those hardscaped or landscaped things that you want to capture, such as maybe you've got bricks, brick paving or standard paving or grass paving or some such. So we'll discuss that too. What I'm going to quickly demonstrate is that you can actually go into any of the floor tools, such as the slab tool, etc. And then this one I'm going to tick thickness only, which is what you'd be using if you were to do kind of your pad, right? And obviously you can go through, I'm going to use metric just because it's what I'm most comfortable with. But obviously, if you are from the US or a region that uses imperial measurements, then you just be typing in feet inches. When you press submit, you can actually start to draw, and you can draw any shape that you want. When you create the loop, you'll see that you'll create the slab, or the pad in this case. So that might be new to many of you, because as you would know, when you're drawing with the PlusSpec war tools, if they form a loop and they're all joined, it means that you can one-click generate items, right? So I might just quickly draw, again, another very quick shape just to demonstrate it. Once you join your loop, you can right-click, walls, generate, and then you can say roof from walls, but you can even do face at base of walls and face at top of walls. So obviously base of walls gives you the ability to automatically generate a face, which is what you are then using when it's selected. It automatically selects it, and you can see those little blue dots. Then that gives you the ability to go through and again selects the kind of flooring that you want, whether it's slab or whatever it may be. Obviously you can include footing at the same time, just untick thickness only, and it gives you those other options. But I'll just do that again, press submit. And as you can see, I now have it. So most of you would know that that's pretty basic. But what I am wanting to talk about is some of the things that probably aren't showcased or that you might not be aware of as much. So the ability to actually draw your shape separate from a face is pretty good. In fact, you can even do it with the joist tool. The joist tool is a little bit more constrained though. So if you are going to go through and select the structure, the timber or lumber that you want to use, etc., and you press submit, you'll see that it's asking you to generate essentially a square or a rectangle. You can't freeform those kind of unique objects, but it will automatically create it for you with a couple of clicks, as you can see. Now that goes into faces, and this is where really there's a huge flexibility in shapes that you can create using the SketchUp tools. So the SketchUp line tool and the SketchUp rectangle tool are what you're going to be using. I mean, perhaps you're even using a circle, right? To create these custom faces. So if you did have a very abstract or different kind of deck that you wanted to create, you can do it using the SketchUp tool. So I might use the circle tool. When you create these shapes, you can see that it automatically generates those faces. So again, it means that I can go into my joist tool and I can press submit. And when I press submit, all I need to do with the joist tool is tell it which way I want to span the structure. So do I want it from going on the green axis, or do I want it on the red axis? So for example, left click to start, get on the green axis, left click to place. And now you'll see that I've created this joist or decking from that shape, and that my primary joists were spanning in that way. Okay. Now I have selected bearers to be on in this option. And you ignore, some people get caught up in some of the geometry. There is some things that happen in these kind of more extravagant shapes. Again, it's kind of a little bit of an additional wastage. It doesn't really do much when you're showing clients, because typically when you get to this point, or when you actually get to a point where you need to present, you're going to clean that up anyway, and you can clean it up and put in additional elements, etc. I just wanted to quickly show you how you can create those shapes. So again, using the rectangle tool, you might come across and, you know, you might have a few bits and pieces going on here. You might have a bit of a circle over here, like that, I don't know. And then I can clean up the shape. So now I've got this custom shape like that. Now that I've got that, I can again click on it, go into my joist tool and do whatever I want. So what I'm trying to really emphasize here is that if you do master how to create these faces using the SketchUp tools, it really gives you an extraordinarily high, or a very high level of detail that you can get to in creating those very bespoke items or shapes. Again, it's worth noting what each item means in the joist tool. So I do have my floor joist, or include floor, I should say, ticked. And look at the little orange tabs on the side. These kind of try to explain via pictures typically, but also text, what each terminology or what each item is trying to represent. So if you're getting a little bit lost and you're not sure what it's going to do, just click on it and it will try to tell you. So for example, in this case, I might make sure that I don't have my bearers or girders enabled at the bottom. I'm going to stick with this, so I don't really care about the structure, press submit, and again, I just need to tell it which way I want it to span. As you can see, the shape or the face that you've created, the joist, will remain. So you've got two options. You can either delete them because they're kind of irrelevant after, but if you feel like you might be making adjustments to your model as you go, it can be good practice just to actually turn them into a group and then assign them to a custom layer. So all my custom layers, I pretty much do the 0, 0. So they're at the top of my list of my layers. I can find them very easily. And this might just be, joist, or maybe it's, ref for reference and joist. But you use whatever terminology or naming convention that makes sense to you. And that means you can hide, once you left click, you can, with the entity info, assign it to that layer so that you can control the visibility. If you ever do need to change your mind, delete it, it means that you just reactivate it, and rather than having to redraw that shape, you can simply move it around. Once you've done that, again, you can actually generate your joist directly from there. Now, it is worth noting that if you do turn your faces into groups, to create the structure or the joist, you do need to double click back into it to activate it. So I'm just going to go like that. Okay, the other thing that's worth noting with the joist tool is that whilst you're activated, so I've just told it which way I want it to span, but whilst you're in this mode, you can continuously change your mind. So I've spanned the main joists going this way. Perhaps I want it to change now. So all I'm doing is left clicking, letting go, getting on the green axis, and then left clicking to place it. Once I've done that, you'll see that the structure has changed and it's changing the way it's spanning. And you can come off on angles, you can do whatever you want to do. So maybe I want it to be approximately 140. As you can see, I've now spanned it on that angle. And again, if I want to, it's just a simple matter of hiding the reference. Now, if you do groups, the actual joist tool is also going to be assigned to that group. So sometimes it can actually be good. I normally would suggest that you don't actually double click into the shape. You first explode the shape again before you, so okay, I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. If I have turned that into a group and I've put it onto the 00 layer, if I do need to reactivate it, the best practice is to right click it, explode it, then create your joist, then make it a group again, and then reassign it to that reference joist, just so you're not adding it to an additional custom layer, which can end up kind of impacting the way that your scenes and your 2D drawings are set up. Looks a little bit convoluted, but once you get into it, it's actually very easy to get used to. The workflow is very easy. So custom shapes give you the ability to do whatever you want with the faces. So you don't always have to rely on the PlusSpec tools to generate the faces for you. You can just simply use the SketchUp tools to draw really whatever the hell you want. I'm now going to quickly talk about how you can actually do a few other items. So the pads are pretty easy, as you can see. So if I had a pad that I wanted to actually put out in this particular model, then again, all I'm doing is going into my slab tool, and I'm making sure I don't have my footings ticked, because typically your pad wouldn't. You're selecting your thickness, press submit, and then you're modeling. And again, you can go and draw it however you want. You can do any shape that you want, and you can type in exact dimensions if you know them. And I'm modeling in 3D here. If you make a mistake, just press delete. What you need to be careful of when you're doing or creating objects in this way is that when you don't accidentally come up and down on the blue axis, and that when you actually do left click on your starting point, you're on the same plane. And then now you've created your pad. Obviously, if you now need to add footing to this or footings to this, if you want to add kind of any reinforcement, etc., you can do that. So you can simply go into the footing tool, and you can create standalone or separate items purely for the footing. So you can give it a width, a height. Do you want it to be below face or whatever it may be? So below face is what I want, because I want to draw it below. Press submit. In fact, you don't even have to press submit. You can now just start drawing. Double click to place it. So really, you can do whatever you want. And these are standalone items too. So when you draw your footings, because you've drawn them as a separate piece, it means that when you left click and select them, and everything will turn blue, you can use the M for Molly on your keyboard, and you can move it around. You can reposition it. So if you change your mind, it's never really going to be that difficult to modify the structure. This enables you to go to a very high level of detail and continuously change your mind as your design progresses. You're never really stuck, and you're never having to remodel every single item. So it can be beneficial to have those standalones. Also, other than using the footing tool, you can also go into the post tool or the postal column tool. And this gives you the ability to obviously put in timber and lumber, masonry, but it also gives you the ability to put in concrete. So you might be wanting to capture some kind of like a round footing. And again, you can do that. You can go in and type in a measurement, press submit. And when you're putting in these items, you want to left click to start. But as you'll see, it's kind of not going in the direction that I want. So if you right click, or if you click on the right arrow on your keyboard, I should say, it's going to toggle through the different alignments, center points. But as you can see, if I keep on toggling, it goes underneath. So I can go above and change the position from where it's aligned and below. And then I simply left click to place it. Again, these are standalone items. So if I want to, I can simply move it around, but I can also copy them and array them. So if I really want to, I can now press M on my keyboard. And if I'm using a PC, I'll tap Control. If I am using a Mac, which I am, I'll tap Option key. And that brings up that little plus arrow next to the Move tool, which means that you're actually going to be creating a copy. Now, this gives me the ability to, for example, to grab a point from wherever I want to reference it, and I might have a spacing that I want. So in this particular case, I actually want to say, well, I'm going to grab it from the end, and get on the green axis, and I'm going to place it here. And now I'm going to show you how you can divide and automatically place or create these arrays. So what I want to do now is I want to click on the little back, I can't even think of what you call that actually, but the stroke, the back stroke. And then you want to say how many times you want to divide it by. And so I might type in 3 and then press enter. And now you're going to space it exactly accordingly via that. Now, if you left click and select all of these items, you are then able to again press the M and tap on the Control or the Option key. And you're able to, for example, maybe I want to come out a certain measurement. I can now, before I do anything else, I can click the X and I can tell it how many times I want to times it by. And it might be, say, only 3. Whoops, that didn't work. Let me do that again. There we go. Now, obviously, with the timesing, it's not going to divide it, so it's not going to evenly space it and make sure that it's in line with the actual start and end. It's just going to do it exactly at that same spacing. So that's a quick overview of how you can actually then go through and add that extra level of detail, so you can go through and put in any kind of additional structure that you need. And because they are separate, you can control them separately too. If you want to, you can actually group these together, so you can control them as one piece, but more often than not, it's pretty easy just to have them as separate items. So the joists, you can do exactly the same. So for joists or pads that are on flat ground, as you can see, it's really easy to do. In fact, you could even go into 2D plan view if you prefer to model in that way. So I'm just going to go into my floor plan 1. And whilst I'm in this mode, I'm then able to go through and draw in 2D mode. So again, grab it by going into the flooring tool. This time I'm just going to do a quick simple joist. And I'm going to say I want it to be from there to there, and I want it to be from there to there, like so. If I go back into my 3D mode, you're going to see that it's been drawn, but the actual, you do really need to take into account where it's spanning from. So I told my joist that I wanted it to be above, not below. If I wanted it to be below, I can simply right click on my joist, edit joist, and I can change my position without lowering it using the Move tool. Okay. Although you can also go M on your keyboard and just lower it into position. So often people ask when they start modeling with PlusSpec for SketchUp, particularly if they haven't modeled with SketchUp before, how do you get precise measurements? How do you actually choose the heights of each item? And it's totally different to any other software because it is true 3D. So very quickly and easily, you'll get used to modeling in 3D, and that gives you the power of understanding more than just numbers. You know, it doesn't really matter how you offset something or what level you tell it, but you're going to want to see how it actually works, and this goes into the design philosophy. But I can simply, if I click on the M, so M from Molly on my keyboard, I can again grab anything on that object and I can move it up or down by an exact measurement. So if I knew that I wanted it to be at this point, I could type it in and get it at that point. Press enter. I now can see exactly how it's looking. That's how you can create kind of the raised levels very, very easily. So as soon as you create any object, you're never ever really stuck where they are inside of PlusSpec for SketchUp. All of your objects are controllable and movable and adjustable. So there's a really high level of flexibility in that. It is difficult to model these shapes in your floor plan views. And again, I would suggest that if you are new to PlusSpec, 99% of our users end up modeling in 3D because you're able to really digest and understand form, function, everything immediately. And it becomes a very easy modeling process as well. If you need to, you can use the guides as well. So before you actually start laying things out, you can click on the T on your keyboard, and there might be a measurement that you want. So if there is, you can get on the blue axis. So at the moment, I'm kind of locked to the red. If I click on the plus or the up arrow on my keyboard, it will lock it to the blue automatically. So if I'm struggling with that, it's a very quick way in which you can lock it to an axis. If I want to lock it to the green axis, click on your left arrow key. If I want to lock it to the red, you click on the right arrow key. But this gives you the ability to add levels. Again, I can even reference the level in which I placed it. I can then reference the line itself, and I can really mass out the different things that I might need. So I might need another thing, say, that distance below it. That means I can now reference that. Now, all of these grids I've drawn out to the side, but these are movable too. So you can move them across, put them in, and assign them next to your actual model or project. They are on the grid layer. So all grids you can hide and you can adjust simply by going into your view, I believe. It might be camera actually, and then you can untick your grids. I actually always lose this one. Oh, there. So it's view, and then you just untick guides. For some reason, whenever I haven't been doing that a lot, I just forget how to do it. Anyway. This becomes really beneficial because if I want to now model from this point, I can grab that actual grid line. So again, just to quickly show you, I might end up deciding that I need another element that's going to be on this level, so I can go into my flooring tool, into my joist tool, and I will be able to grab that point. So I've grabbed it. I can tell it where I want it to go to. Again, perhaps I want it to be on a certain point, come out, and I can draw it. And as you can see, I can also draw my joists. I don't have to draw them horizontal. So that's how you can actually put in sloping elements, etc. Just when you're drawing it, you've got the ability to kind of reference other points in your model. So your starting point, and then telling it which way you want it to come out. Now, when I drew it across and came down. I'm going to draw that again. It can actually even be beneficial to grab the line or copy the line if it makes it easier, because you can just press M. Again, you can use the copy command and you can bring it across to the other side if you want to reference that line. So, because sometimes with the joist tool, if you're drawing it like that, it can actually be difficult to draw it on the plane. So, same with the SketchUp tools. If you've got the extra reference line on the other side, you can see it's going to snap to the blue a lot easier. But you can actually do that again by using your arrow keys. You can tell it what plane you want it to be actually on, right? So play around with that. In this case, it was the plus or the up arrow, and I've locked it immediately on that plane. With the PlusSpec joist tool, if you are drawing it just with that without a shape, again, you're going to be able to now select both instances. You're not going to make a mistake as far as what plane you've drawn it on. So I'm coming across, grabbing that point, and now you can see if I zoom around, it's showing me where I'm drawing it. So again, if I really wanted to, I could grab that bottom plane and know that I want it just to come down onto the ground floor. but for me, I want it to be on that horizontal line, and you can draw it. Again, if you make a mistake, don't forget you can press delete and make sure that you select it properly. The biggest problems happen when you don't look at where you've pointed or what you've actually selected, especially if you are coming on or have the ability to choose different planes or different heights. So just if you are going to be modeling in that way, you really need to just be very careful that what you're clicking is accurate. Alternatively, if you're a little bit worried, that's when it can be very useful to be using like the SketchUp face tool, etc., because you know no matter what you're doing here that I'm stuck on the blue, and therefore I'm always going to be drawing on that horizontal level. Again, I can go back into my flooring tool and select my joist. Now, what I'm going to really discuss now is a few of the different finishing or different ways that you can even construct the joists themselves. So obviously we've got, beam on post, we've got beam flush, we've got beam to post sides, etc. And you can go to that level of detail, so I'm going to talk about some of them. It's also worth noting, though, in the floor joist tool and the ceiling joist tool, you have the ability to include ceiling insulation because you might be needing to insulate whatever it may be. And don't forget, the below face is where you want to select. So if it's not ticked below face, which is what happened when I drew this one down in the floor plan mode, because it's not below face, it's always going to generate the joist above, not below. If you want it to generate below, you need to make sure that your below face is ticked. Now, obviously, you have a lot of different items and a lot of different structural choices that you can make, and depending on your material library. So again, I'm using the Australian material library in this case, but if you are using UK or US, you'll have all of your various structural sizes available. There are also going to be times where you might not be using a standard timber or lumber size, and you can easily create and manage your own structure. I'm not going to go into material creation. We have done a few webinars on it before. We will be doing a more in-depth one again in the near future. But go check out our blog. We actually do talk about the material creator, and it's a good kind of guide. We also have tutorials. But once you create your own structure, it will be in your list forever after. Now, if you are using the Pro version, and I dare say that all of you probably would be, or most of you, you want to be able to go into the joist type and select from the list, because you don't have to just use solid timber or lumber. You can use LVL, you can use I-joists, you can use floor trusses, steel, and block and beam. Each one has different options that are available. It will automatically update. So if I went into this I-joist, for example, it's going to generate how it looks, and it's going to give me the ability to choose different options. Again, if there is something in there that you want to create, not in this standard drop-down list, create it, and it will then be in your library forever after. Don't forget spacing. You've got complete control of spacing, so if you want to adjust that, all you need to do is come in and tell it what the spacing, or what spacing you require. Perimeter beams, you can choose whether or not you want to include the perimeter beams, or if you don't. So if I untick that, I'm not going to do my barrel girders, and again, I'm just going to press submit. But also, do check your material selections and finishes, because this gives you the ability to obviously go through and select from different items. These are essentially all generic. There's a couple of branded options that probably would be available depending on your region. But again, if you've got something specific that you want to use, create it using the material creator, and you've got it forever after. I am emphasizing the material creator today because it is one of our most powerful tools, and it actually is one of the most underutilized. Once you get the hang of it, you can make hundreds of materials within a couple of hours, and then you never have to make another material again. Anyway, once you're happy with the material, you can then press submit, or again, you can just start drawing to tell it which way you want it to span, and it will obviously update. Now again, I use the face to generate that particular joist or decking. So I do triple click or double click, so I select the face and get rid of it. Now, the joists and decking are parametric. So at any time you change your mind, again, simply go into it by right-clicking, clicking on the floor joist, and editing the joists themselves. So I'm not going to go into all of the different options. That's something that you can play around with yourself. I am going to quickly just go back into the solid. And this time I'm going to put in the perimeter beams. And I'm also now going to tick the bearer and girder. And I'm just going to leave it on that sizing. I don't really care. And I'll even tick this perimeter beam too. And now I'm going to press submit. And I'm going to tell it that, again, I want it to span on the red. Okay, so what's happening here? If we go into the structure, you can see that, oh, by the way, when you go into the structure scene, we'll typically leave the full finish on. If you want to remove that too, you just need to know what it is actually on. So just double click until you can select the actual decking component itself, and you can see that that is on 17 flooring. It's a very useful trick when you are using PlusSpec to start or getting used to double clicking onto each of the different items until you can read what layer they're actually on. And it means that you'll become very proficient in knowing understanding the smart layering system and how you can hide and etc. It saves a lot of time. So in this one, I might be in structure, but I want to view the structure without the decking material. So I just need to go in to my layers, and I need to untick the 17 flooring. Again, as long as I don't update my structure scene, if I do click back on my structure scene, it's going to revert it to its default. So if you ever do need to make sure that, for example, it remembers this visibility change, you need to right-click on the scene that you want to update and select Update. It will now remember that that layer doesn't want to be visible on that scene. Okay. Now, the structure is really there for a guide only because it really depends on the project. It depends on many, many different things. And so it very much is up to you to decide what you want to do and using the different methods that you might be creating for your joist or your decking. Let me go back into all. So there are obviously a few different ones that we discussed earlier. So I'm going to come over here and we're going to talk about some of the typical ones. Now, I haven't drawn any posts in yet, and at the moment, PlusSpec doesn't automatically generate posts. So it is something that you need to put in separately using the array technique like I showed you. It is actually very fast. It gives you a lot of flexibility too, because often when you automate a lot of things, you're going to want to change the structure. You're going to want to move things over. Like, for example, in this particular shape, with my spacing that I have done, you can see that I've got a closer bearer or girder at the end. And maybe I don't want that, so I can reconfigure it. I can reconfigure it at any time by double-clicking into the joist. And you can now see that I can actually, if I left-click, I can select the joists themselves or the bearers. If I double-click into the bearers, I can now select each individual item. This gives me the ability to delete. It also gives me the ability to copy. So if I want to add an additional item or manipulate this one, I might know that I need a spacing there for my beam, for example, so I can type it in so that I'm ready to put in my structure. So that's how you can manipulate it. Now, the problem with these manual overrides, like adding additional structure and making changes, is if you do make a change to your decking parametrically, and that means by right-clicking, going into your floor joists and editing the joist, or even doing something like adding a void, it will forget these items. Now, when you add a void in a deck, a lot of people do get a little bit stuck because they're normally on the all scene. And the all scene is obviously showing you literally everything. It's showing you your structure, it's showing you the finish that you're using, etc. And when you're trying to specify a point, it can become a little bit tricky because it might be trying to grab the structure itself. So it can be really good practice to turn structure off. That means that when you start to draw your shape, you're not, or PlusSpec is not getting distracted and trying to pick up any additional geometry below. And you can draw any shapes that you want. Once you draw your shape, you've cut into it. If you go back into the all scene, you'll see that it will automatically cut around your joist as well. Now, the problem though, is that it's removed or deleted any of those additional structural items or changes that I've made. So typically you want to do those at the end of a project once there is less, or it's less likely that you're going to have to be making design changes. Alternatively, if it is that you're wanting to add additional structure it can actually be best practice not to do the manual overrides and instead go into the new beam tool. In the beam tool, you can grab the structure that you require. So you've got steel options, you also have the timber and lumber options. So in here, I might know that that's a 240, so I'm just going to grab that one so it's the same, so you can see. And I can now press submit. And if I want to, I can start to draw it. Now I can, again, use my arrow keys if I want to change the positions so that I can see how it's going to actually look. And then you just double clicking to place it. Now, again, these are standalone, so it's a new item that I've created, so I can move it. Now, this one, I actually selected a 240 by 35. Again, don't get caught up in the structure that I'm using. We have a lot of people from a lot of different countries. We have a lot of US users. And we're in about, I think, represented by 22 countries today. So don't get caught up in measurements or materials because obviously you can control them by your material library and anyone that you actually make. But now that you've created this additional structure, for example, it means that no matter what you do to your joist, your additional structure that you wanted to create will never be lost. So it resolves that issue of going in, adding additional elements. The only thing that it won't allow you to do, obviously, is remember if you've deleted something, right? So I might not want that one. If you're going to go to an extremely high level of detail and you've got very custom placements, etc., it might be better to simply, for your bearers, for example, not generate them with PlusSpec. So again, I can actually just go back and untick them and instead just use the beam tool to manually put in each element. So I'm going to untick it, press submit. And again, you need to tell it which way it's spanning each time that you make a change. You can lower it. It depends on how you told it or where you told it you want it to be generated from. But that again is the power of the move tool. You can simply grab it and put it back into its original place. The guides can be useful for that too, to make sure that your geometry is not moving all over the place. So again, now that I've drawn this particular piece of structure, I could use my copy tool and I can now just go in and I might have really custom spacings or really custom things I need to do with this structure, and it enables you to do it without trying to automatically or parametrically generate it. And again, you can go to really quite a high level of detail in this way. But that's fine for kind of any kind of structure. I'm going to go back a couple though. For your beam on post. So with your beam on post, it's going to be very similar to what I talked about with the pad itself. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be drawing in the structure that you require. Now, you can actually also create your own content like this before you do it. So it becomes basically a component that you're just dropping and placing as required. And obviously you can go to quite a high level of detail. You can make sure that it's got, or it's been connected in the way that you want it to be. This is a Simpson strong tie detail. And I've just used some textures here, but again, use the PlusSpec tool so it's being quantified. And once you turn it into the component and group, every time you place it, it will still be part of your bill of materials or your bill of quantities. And it gives you the ability to simply grab it, move it around, control it by its whatever point that you want. Maybe it's the midpoint, and then I might know I need to set it back by a certain measurement. And again, I can then now press the M. I can use the Option key or the Control key, and I can simply place it how I want. It's good to be able to grab a reference point, because it means that I'm always going to grab a particular item from the same place. So I've taken it from the exact same place in or from the bearer. So again, I'm selecting that endpoint, which means that when I select on that endpoint, they're all aligned perfectly. Now again, if I really wanted to, if I knew the spacings were all the same, I could simply X3, and I can keep on going. And again, if I know now that I've got a certain spacing on the other way, I'm simply selecting it, grabbing it from a point, and telling it what the measurement is. Maybe I need 2 in this case, but maybe I need to divide it. So again, this is where we're getting back into the idea of I might know it needs to be, say, there, but now I actually know that I need a second item in there, so divide it by 2. done. And one of the best parts with PlusSpec for SketchUp is obviously because you're using building components, you understand very quickly if there's a mistake and if things are not working. Now, the best part about using parametric tools like the floor joist and every single one of the PlusSpec tools is that if you do want to change things, typically they're done via a click of a button. So I'm going to select this shape that I made, I'm going to move it across this way, and now I've fixed my cut and it now works with what I need. So very quickly and easily updated. So that's how you create your arrays. Now, how did I create this part here? Well, all I did is I went into my post tool, and it's worth spending these times to get this little extra level of detail because there's a lot of different combinations. And PlusSpec therefore works no matter where you are in the world, right? It's for you to put in that extra level of detail and have it working the way that you want. So I might be starting with my timber or my lumber, rectangular. I might have a height that I want, in this case, the 400 millimeters, press submit, and I'm going to place it. Now that I've got that, I'm going to go into I could go straight back into my column tool or post tool, and I'm now going to choose my concrete round, and again, I'm going to tell it what the sizing is. So make sure you can go into your sizings too, and that's how you can control the actual size of might be only 200, and it might be 500. I'm not going to get into detail, press submit. And sometimes it's just easier just drawing them, knowing that, again, you can grab it, and then now you can select it, move it in, align it, and I'm just going to grab that middle point there, align it to that middle point there. And then obviously to finish this detail though, I just need to know what kind of joiner or fastener I'm going to be using. So I would know that I would be raising my timber or lumber, and then I'm going to go in and find the Simpson Strong Tie product, or you can even go into the component tools. In the component tool, we actually have some straight out of the box. So if you go into the miscellaneous, I think it's if you go into the last one, the hardware, you can actually go through here and you can choose, for example, your different kind of post brackets, recessed, Y, and then we have obviously hangers, stuff like that you might be wanting to use, top plate, base plates, etc. Right. So with your hangers, you can even go to that level of detail if you really need to, and make sure that everything is working appropriately. In this case, I'm just going to go like so, press submit, and I'm going to grab that in. Now that I've got this object in here, I can tell it what I need it to be so that it fits the beam properly. So again, I can go through and set the gap, the pole size, so it's obviously a lot bigger than that, the post depth, the post width, everything. I can go to quite a high level of detail. Again, because these are their individual items, though, it means that I can very quickly understand that doesn't work, grab this point, align it, and then very quickly and easily I can understand how wide it needs to be by using the tape measure tool, going back in saying, okay, that one was 115 by whatever, and therefore, again, because it's parametric, right click on this fastener object itself, and again, you can come into here and you can come into the pole size, depth, width, etc. So it's actually 115 by 115. Press submit. Now that you've done that, as long as you're happy with where it's sitting and it's aligned appropriately, you can then select everything by left-clicking, dragging, highlighting all of the items, and you can even turn it into a component or a group. Now, the difference between a component and a group is just a standalone item. If you do turn it into a component, it means that if you do make a change, every single one will adapt to that change. They're basically a clone. So I'm going to show you two examples. I'm going to grab one and then move it over. And this one I'm going to do a group, and I'm going to make a copy. If I go and make a change to this particular one, I might even just do a manual override. I just want to push and pull it up. You can see that the other one, the copy, doesn't update. However, if I select these and make these a component, I might call it my whatever, call it whatever it is, create. If I now copy this one and move it over, I go into this one and I do a manual override, you can see that they're both going to update. So that's very, very useful when you want the ability to make sure that if you are making these arrays and you want to make really en masse changes very quickly and intelligently, the component is the option. If you don't think you're ever going to need that, then the group can be the option. I'm going to go back a couple, and I'm going to show you how you can even have some that will be the same component and others that will be unique. So obviously, I don't want all three of these to update. I only want these two to be the same, but they are a component. So if I was to make a change, if I were to make a change, all of them will update. So what I need to do is I just need to right click on this one and I need to say make unique. Now that I've said make unique, it is its own version. So if I double click into this one and make that change, you can see I'm making those changes to this one, but this one has now become its own. So what happens if I now copy this unique one? Well, it will be unique to itself. So again, this one has remembered that that one is its own version. So it's very quick for you to create very different versions that will also be used in an intelligent way and being able to update them quickly. But again, if I really needed to, I can simply right click on that one and say make unique, and now I've got two completely unique items that I can adjust. Okay, I need to quickly jump. We are running out of time, but I wanted to spend a bit of time on that. But obviously you've got the other option where your beam is flush, for example, and I've showcased it here. So how did I do that? Well, actually it was done just with a very quick manual override. It wasn't through the parametric tools. So if I just quickly forward joist, edit joist, I'm going to press submit without doing anything. And what that does is it just rejuvenates or regenerates the original. So press submit, tell which way you want it to span, and you can see that it actually, I do actually have my bearers and girders down below, but to make it beam flush, I've double clicked in, grabbed the bearers and girders and simply moved them up. Now some people get caught up in some of the cutting and wastage because obviously there's a few things that would be going on here with the structure, but our comment is typically don't go to that level of detail. A little bit of wastage is good if you're doing your bill of materials or your bill of quantities or your estimate. There is no point cutting each individual item. It's just not worth the time. Visually, it still represents what it needs to as well. Obviously, if you're putting your posts in, you're doing them a little bit differently in this kind of beam flush. But again, you can just grab it and align them and do whatever you want, depending on the detail itself. So you're grabbing it, saying that it might need to be, say, there and there, whatever the detail is. And again, just be accurate, because you are in 3D. You just want to make sure you're selecting those points exactly. You can then have, if you really need to, you can even include the fasteners or whatever you need over here, if you need to incorporate that. So pretty quick, as you can see. There is another option though, if you don't want to do that, and the problem with that one is, again, if you're sitting with your client and then your client says, well, I don't like that material, it means that you're going to go through, make the change, but you've forgotten that you have to quickly go back and make that manual change again. So again, I might be like, okay, they want this one, press submit, draw it, and then now I've lost that change. So again, it might be more beneficial that you don't create or generate the bearers or girders inside of the PlusSpec tool, and instead you're using the beam tool, like I showed you over here, to put in those bearers and girders in the position that you need them. So if you do update your the overall joist, the bearer section, so the beam flush will remain where it is. I hope you all understand that. Essentially, going back into the beam tool and just drawing it in, making the array, it's in the position you need it, therefore it's fine. Final one that I want to talk about is obviously beam to posts, so sides, so double bearers, etc. So the way that you're doing that, again, you're actually better off going, rather than doing the manual override by double clicking in and then grabbing the structure using the move tool and the copy tool and placing it. So you might know that it's 115 maybe. Rather than doing it that way, where again, if you do change your mind on any of the materials or structure, you'll lose all of your additional elements. It may be better again to go straight into the beam tool and generate those additional pieces of the beams or bearers. It may even be beneficial, like I said earlier, not even to generate the bearer or girder through the joist tool and treat those as a separate item, because it's pretty quick. Right-click, floor joist, edit joist, get rid of the bearers, go into your beam tool, quickly draw one, copy, paste it, move it around, done. You can go to a very, very high level of detail with connections. As I said, we've got some of the Simpson-Strong type fasteners. So if you really want to capture the fasteners in there, you can. It can be good if you're wanting to really go to create a detail, for example, or if you really want to go to the absolute nth degree with your bill of materials or estimate. But a lot of people, a lot of users do err on the side of keeping it a little bit more simple. So it means that their model is a little bit cleaner, faster, etc. Okay, so that is the quick overview. The only one that I didn't have a chance to really talk about was the kind of split levels. But as you can see, it's pretty easy, right? If I have a split level here, because they're all individual items, I can simply go through, move them where I need to, and then I can put my stairs in. Now I can use different levels. Like again, it might be built up of just different decking here. So I might say, well, this shape needs to be its own. I can go in there. Again, I can generate whatever I want. I'm not even going to worry about my material, probably changed, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to span it that way. Now that I've done that, I can move it over. Now, obviously, I haven't done this very accurately, and you probably, no matter where you are in the world, you wouldn't really be detailing like this, but the point is you can, right? So I might say something's going on like that, and then this one needs to come down like so, or again, this one is now being moved over to the bottom side, probably from structure, and then this one is doing the same. So whatever it may be, I mean, you can go into really any level of detail that you want. So you can easily create those split levels. Now, one of the things I actually did want to talk about before we go on the Q&A, but please start writing, I can see that there are a lot of questions already, is that kind of soft landscaping and hard landscaping. And the best way to actually do that is through the full surface tool. That's also how you're going to finish off your edges. So if you're going to clad the decking on this side, it's beneficial just to actually create the same decking texture in the floor tool, and then or the wall tool, because the wall tool is the one you're going to be using to go vertical, and then that way you're gonna actually put in and clad your decking that way. You can manually do it using the SketchUp tools just by double clicking in, and I can simply push and pull, and then I can, and you obviously you'd be putting in the dimensions, and then I'm going to go down and I'm going to finish it off, and I can even get rid of that line, and then now obviously I'm just going to go into my paint bucket. I'm going to grab the material that I need, and I'm just going to paste it on, and that's how you can finish it off. Now for the soft landscaping though, if I go into my floor tools, this is also how you do flat roofs, by the way. So flat roofs are really just you're either going to choose a concrete structure or a steel or timber or lumber, and then it's a matter of just putting in the membranes, the thicknesses of whatever the flat roof has been made up of, But there are cases where you can even create your own kind of concrete pavers, whatever it may be. So I really like concrete grass pavers. So I've created one. I've given it its thickness, and I press submit. And that means when I'm drawing, I can now go around and say, okay, I'm going to have a section. It's going to do something pretty funky like that. I've returned it, and I now have this paving. It's going to be quantified. And again, if I really wanted to, I could even move it. If I didn't model it in place, I've got the ability to move it around. And I think that's one of the biggest flexibilities with PlusSpec compared to other software. especially other BIM software. It's because it's combined with SketchUp, you've got that freedom of all of the tools. You can easily move things around and understand how they're working and adjust them. And you can very quickly and easily tell what works and what doesn't work and control them. You're not really constrained by saying, I have to put the heights in every single thing, and I have to tell this paver that it's sitting at this level and blah, blah, blah. No, you're able just to go through and manually do it yourself. This is the same for tiles. It's the same for grass. If you really wanted to quantify your grass, simply, again, going into your floor tools and creating a grass layer. You can also then go through and even put glue, underlay, all of those kinds of things if you really need to. And obviously there's pavers. And I had created a generic, I believe it is there. I hope it's there. I might have actually, there we go. So I've got a paver. So my brick common paving, press submit. And again, same thing. I can come across here and I can grab it. So I'm drawing, I'm just being as accurate as I can be, staying on the same plane. So I might go to there. Yeah, and then I'm going to go back, draw it. I now have my paver. It's going up, by the way, not down. So that's then giving me the ability to come grab it, put it down, match it however I need to. And it also gives me the ability to understand how things are actually going to work, how they're going to meet. So there is a step down from this one to this one, or do I want it to be flush, however I want it to be. But I've obviously got my bricks and my paving. If I want to change the brick texture, I don't want it to be in this pattern, great, just find the texture that you need, create your material, it will be there forever after. And that's how you can create all of these custom kind of, in many ways, they're kind of like a pad or, Anyway, I am now going to quickly open up to the Q&A because we have gone over. Let's just start that now. Okay, it seems to be only the case for one person, but you said that you lost the audio. If you have lost audio in the recording that is sent out after the webinar, you should be fine. There's obviously something happening with your mic. Can you turn the cladding off so that you can align the floor structure with the wall structure, not the cladding? Oh, 100%. So that's part of the advantage of being able to model in structure. And that's why we believe structure is so important when you're designing, modeling, or quoting. And users should really get used to modeling in the structure scene. And the reason why is that often you don't ever want it to go to the finish, like what I've done even here, right? You're actually wanting it to align with the structure more often than not. So if that is the case, the best way to do that is to go into your structure scene so that you're not getting confused and you're not getting accidentally grabbing the points that don't relate, that finish items. So getting into the structure scene is really important. In fact, when I'm modeling, even with my internal walls, I typically model in the structure scene. Sometimes I'll model in the ground floor plan too. So the same thing. It's the ground floor plan will be turning off your finish layer by default, so your internal lining. But if you're in 3D, the problem is if you're in the all scene, you've got your internal finish. And this is a problem that a lot of people do make, because when they go into the wall, for example, they start to model, but they're not really aligning structure. So I might have this one, press submit, and if I grab it from there and I start to draw, you'll see in a second that it's aligning to the actual internal lining. So what I really want to do to make it easier for myself, I just turn it into structure mode, and therefore I'm not going to have this gap. It means that when I grab my point in my structure, I'm going to get it from the actual right point so that my structure is aligned. Now, like the joists, if you really needed to add additional items in here for your wall structure, that's where the beam post is really good for. So I'm not going to get into the beam. I'm just going to show you manually, but you have the ability to obviously grab or create your beam tool and align it with the internal, so you're connecting it how you need to. Because you're drawing it with the beam tool, it means that if you do make a change to the wall, it doesn't matter because your structure will be there. But that's the advantage of going into your different scenes, particularly the structure scene. Oh yeah, balustrades. Okay, there was a lot that I was trying to go through, so we might have to come back to that one. I'm going to show you really quickly though. If you click on the staircase tool, you will notice now that there is a new balustrade or handrail tool. And if you click on it, it's going to open the handrail dialog. Now in here, you've got the ability to set height, the type. So we've got wire, we've got glass, etc. You can go through and you can, like any structural item, you can set your max post spacing. You can also go into your post type. So is it going to be round, square? Is it going to be timber or lumber or metal? What's the diameter of the post? Rail types, again. So again, every item you can play with. Rail diameters, you can really set and customize it for your own and for what you're needing to achieve. And we've got a few items here that you can choose from. Tensioner types, etc., a number of wires. So you can go to quite a high level of detail. And then selecting the materials, aluminium, stainless steel, timber, lumber, whatever it may be. Press submit. And then what you're able to do is simply, again, I would be going into structure if it's going to be on my structure. If it's going to sit on my finish, then I'm not. I'm just going to have it sitting on my finish. And now that I've placed it, understand where it places it from. Again, it's important. If you need to set a setback, then it's good to do that with a guide, because wherever you draw the line is where it's going to draw from. And then you've got the ability to move it around still. So if you don't want that, you can place it. But obviously that doesn't work anymore. So I really like guides. I think that once you get used to guides, they become very beneficial. I might know that I want it to start there, and then I want it to start end there. That means I've got the ability again to go into my stair tool, select the balustrade. I can even offset it inside if I want to without having to move it, but I don't really care. Just going to do it this way. So double click to end it. And then now that I'm happy with it, I can simply move it into position. Again, if I created a guide, I could have offset it so it was exactly where it needed to be. So again, it's parametric, so I can right click on the handrail and I can edit it. So I can change the styles. I can be looking at it and saying that's not exactly what I want. Maybe I want to change the height, but maybe I want it to turn to glass. So I'm going to turn it to 1500. Whatever. I'm just happy with the rest, press submit. And then as you can see, I've now adjusted it. It is parametric. So as I make my changes, I can go into quite a high level of detail and do that. Obviously, you don't have to draw one balustrade. You can actually draw the entire shape. So that's where if you're drawing it and you want it to be offset by the exact distance, make sure that you use the guide. It's the only way at the moment with the balustrade tool to get it accurate. Because you can't set an offset distance when you're drawing with the balustrade at the moment. So again, I'm just going to show you the perimeter. I'm going to go around, and I'm not going to get it super accurate. I'll turn that one back to that. Press submit, and again, I can grab any point that I want, but I might just start from there. I might just come to that point actually. Go to that point, go around to that point, double click to end. And now I've got my balustrade. So the balustrade tool, the most important thing is that you understand at the moment that you need to understand the offset distance, which is best done with the guide, because if you just follow the line, it's not going to set this position. And then if you want to move this particular item, you really can't. You're at the moment, the only thing with redefining the shape is that you're going to actually have to redraw it. Okay, sloped continuous concrete footings. So 100%. You can go into any level of detail that you want. Sometimes it can actually be really beneficial just to even use the SketchUp tools and then dim them. And you're still going to have them quantified if you're doing something, really bespoke. But say, for example, I went into my footing tool and I know that I want it to be sloped. I'm just going to show you this, because again, it's a manual override, but it's pretty powerful. So I've drawn my footing. It's just square, but I know that I want this end to come up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep on double clicking So I can grab that little line at the bottom. I can then use the M, so M for Molly on my keyboard, and I can come up, and I might even know that I need it to be like so. Now I have a footing that's sloped. If it's very, very complex, you may be better off actually not using the footing tools and manipulating them. Instead, using SketchUp shapes, which is what SketchUp is great for. You can do literally any shape that you want, like so, you know, whatever it may be. Maybe that's your footing that you need to achieve. Now what you can do is you can dim it. So going into the PlusSpec dim tool, you would, and you can, you know, do this around the entire perimeter, whatever you want to do. Put it on the layer, so the concrete or the footing layer that you want. So you just need to obviously understand those, give it information, naming, etc. And then just to finish the job, all you want to do is copy the concrete. So you want the footing texture. So you're going to go into your bucket tool, you're going to find the footing concrete, and you're just going to paste it on. Now it will be quantified. Can you do a pool fence type of handrail? Yes, you can. So it really depends. I mean, region to region is different. So if you need to do handrail only, you can actually select that. And then obviously you can choose different kind of pool fences. With pool fences though, it can actually be good to simply draw it using the SketchUp tools. There's also other kind of fence types that you can use. So it really depends how you're going to do that. But that would be you going through understanding the kind of pool fence that you want and manipulating the post spacings and the post sizes. So if you wanted them really close together, then you could. A quick demonstration of that before we go on. I've only got time for one more, guys. I apologize. We did, as I said, run over today. But again, if I wanted to do a traditional fence, again, what I'm going to be doing is just making sure that my post spacing is very close. So it might only be, like, for example, that my post diameter is suited, so it might only be 10 millimeters. Again, I'm talking in metric here, and etc. But then obviously there's a few things in here that you might not want. You might not want glass, you might not want wire. That's fine because you can simply get rid of them as well. I've never put 0, so it'll be interesting to see if that works. Press submit. You're going to have to do a bit more adjustment. I didn't adjust everything in there, but you want your post spacings, etc. But as I said, with the pool fences, you might actually be better off just using SketchUp content and creating it yourself. You can save it as a component. Alternatively, you can go to the SketchUp 3D warehouse. There's a lot of content on there too. So the balustrade, short answer, the balustrade and handrail tool is not really for the fencing. Okay, look, I had a few more questions about the balustrade tool. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of time to go through them, but it is actually worth noting for my last thing that I'm going to talk about with the balustrade is that you don't even have to be on the same, you can follow any level, so you don't have to be on the same plane. So the last thing I'm going to show you is if I go back into the balustrade tool, if I'm just going to use this line to, yep, I'm going to say, put that back to that, and I'm going to say that, press submit. You can simply follow that shape, double click to end, and now I've got my balustrade or handrail, and then I can continue to manipulate it. I set my post sizing to be quite small, but again, I can go back in there and I can edit that accordingly. Okay, if you do have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you do feel like you want to get good fast, we do have obviously paid training options. Check out our website. But otherwise, I'll see you next week. Thanks.